Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight I wanted to take a look at a few things that have to do with what I call legalized racism. In Brazil, there's always been the argument that unlike the United States or South Africa, there were never any laws on the books that legally discriminated against Black people, persons of African ancestry. And well, maybe you don't have the exact same laws, that's true. But as I've explained time and time again, um, racism works a little bit different in Brazil. You know, there are some mechanisms where it works the exact same way, and there's other ways where people will look and say, well, the absence of something means that it must not exist, or at least visibly, what I'll say. You can't look for the exact same laws because you're not going to find the exact same laws. But when you analyze the history of some of the laws and the decrees that are on the book, you see a clear pattern here, which can go, miles for explaining why there's a discrepancy between those who consider themselves Black, those who consider themselves brown or white, or whoever else may be the, populations in Brazil. So, I want to first mention that I have a couple of photos that I have that I included in this article. And these are some intriguing, very intriguing photos. These are photos that, and I'd say in the last 10, 15 years, people have dug these photos up. These are pictures of, slave life in Brazil. Slavery ended officially in Brazil in 1888. And so there's a number of good pictures that came out of that era. Okay. Leading up to abolition in 1888. It's intriguing because there's a documentary that just either it's coming out or it just came out that's talking about how even though legally sanctioned slavery ended in Brazil in 1888, another topic that I've talked a lot about is that labor that is analogous to slave labor it's all over Brazil. Like I said, I could devote a whole blog to just talking about people who have been been discovered working in like slave-like conditions where they're kept in a home, they're treated in a certain way, and they're not being paid. But that's a whole nother story. I'm gonna probably tackle that within the next week or two. But let's talk about laws to prevent the progress of Blacks in Brazil, because we see these laws, they're on the books. So let's get into it. Okay, so this photo shows a picture of Black Brazilians working on a coffee plantation in 1882. Okay, slavery in Brazil, coffee being a major export. So a couple of things I wanted to discuss as I walk you through this video. Again, what I just mentioned, that there were no racist laws in Brazil, which is just not true. Two, there was no justification for affirmative action policies in Brazil. And, I'm not someone who says affirmative action should be something that should exist forever, but I do understand that definitely you have you can see this discrepancy in the way people who are perceived as Black, people who are perceived as white. And the difference is the penalties and the advantages that you have in Brazil. When Brazil was close to abolishing slavery, they opened up its borders to European immigration. So it was almost like they brought in 5 million enslaved Africans, and then they brought in 5 million European immigrants. Like I said, it was twofold. The reason for bringing in these immigrants: one, they wanted to whiten the population numerically, because by the time abolition of slavery came, the majority of people in the country were either Black or brown. So they wanted to even up those numbers, bring up the white numbers a little bit more, and then they wanted to stimulate, encourage interracial unions that produce lighter skinned children. That would say within 2 to 3, maybe 4 generations, the entire Brazilian population would be white or something close to it. There's a video I just did, a 2-part video that I just did about that like a week or two ago. Definitely, I'll put a link to that. Number 3 is the idea that Brazilians see themselves as all equal. And once you set a precedence according to the law that contradicts what you're saying, it's a moot point. People might say that verbally, but the inequality that you see in Brazil based upon whiteness or blackness, and it becomes very obvious that even though we're all human beings, people are clearly not treated in the same way socially in Brazil, right? In this today's video, I'm just gonna look at a couple of laws that's on the books that, these are a couple of the ways that we see the reasons of why the Black population is behind the white population. So let's get into a couple of these. Before I even get into that point, this is going to speak on the current educational differences between white and non-white, because what's going on today, and since I've been studying Brazil way back in 2000, you've always seen that the white population is ahead in terms of education. White people were more likely to get a college education. They were more likely to graduate from high school. They were more likely to be 2 years ahead of the Black and brown population in terms of how many years of education they attained. So this is just some statistics from 2018 from the Agência de IBGE, which is Brazil's, it's the, how can we say, the Brazilian Institute for Geography and Statistics, okay? The other two sources I'm using for this video are Museu da Imigração site and the Escolhendo Fatos IG page. Okay, so let's look at what it's saying here. Blacks and browns they have more education, but the inequality in relations to white people remains. Okay. In 2018, the percentage of Black or brown 18 to 24-year-olds with less than 11 years of schooling who did not attend school fell from 2016 at 30.8% to 2018 at 28.8%. This indicator was 17.4% among whites in 2018. So even though the number fell, almost like 2 full points, they're still at that point still 11 points behind the white population in terms of having less than 11 years of schooling. The high school completion rate, the proportion of people aged 20 to 22 who have completed this level for the Black or brown population was 61.8% for Black and brown and 76.8% for whites. The illiteracy rate for Black or brown people fell from 9.8% in 2016 to 9.1% in 2018, but is still higher than among whites that are at 3.9%. Between 2016 and 2018, the illiteracy rate among Blacks and browns aged 15 or over fell from 9.8 to 9.1%, but is still higher than that of whites at 3.9%. In that same period, the proportion of people aged 25 or older with at least a high school education rose from 37.3 to 40.3%. Among the white population, this percentage was 55.8%. So as we can see, going all the way back as many years as I've followed Brazil, you still see this gap between education attainment between the non-white population and the white population. Now, how did this get started? Why is it that you'll find more Black kids, or if you prefer Black and brown, that are outside of school, they're going to work early? You still have a population of people where a sizable percentage only makes it to like the 6th grade. Okay. How did this inequality get started? So the reason why I'm bringing this, talking about the inequalities in current Brazilian society, you go all the way back to 1837 and we can see this, how the seeds were planted for this inequality. So the first education law, Blacks not allowed to go to school. Law number 1 of January 14th, 1837, the following are prohibited from attending public schools. First, people suffering from contagious diseases. Second, slaves and Black Africans, even if they are free or freed. This was Brazil's first law. Think about that for a minute. Here's one of the pictures, washing of the gold in the state of Minas Gerais from 1880. Okay. 1850, the land law. Blacks were not allowed to own land. The law of 1850 passed in the same month and year as the Eusébio de Queiroz law, Law Law 581 of September 4th, 1850, which provided for the end of the slave trade. The land law, as it came to be known, was anticipated by large landowners and politicians who wanted to prevent blacks from owning land. It established the end of land appropriation. No more land could be appropriated through labor, but only by purchase from the state. The land already occupied would be measured and subject to conditions of use, or once again, it would be in the hands of the state, which would sell it to whoever it chose. To whoever it chose. In addition to preventing slaves from owning land, since they could only obtain it through work, this law provided for government subsidies for the arrival of white immigrants to be hired in the country, further devaluing the work of black men and women. So look at what's going on here. There's a great book. I think it was from George Reed Andrews, and it talked about blacks and whites in the Sao Paulo labor market. And it's a question that you have to always ask. Why is it that Brazil opened its doors to immigration, European immigrants? Okay, so I already answered that question a few minutes ago. But it always fascinated me because I'm saying you got all of these former slaves that are available for work, right? There's no sensible reason for why you would not allow these people to get the jobs as it was moving into a free labor market around, in the late 19th, early 20th centuries. So, but look at what's going on here. They're subsidizing white immigrants to come into the country. Like 4 to 5 million European immigrants came into Brazil between 1870 and 1940, while at the same time, they're like kicking the former slaves just to the side of the road and just allowing European immigrants to come in and take these jobs, which makes no sense. But then if you block black people from getting land because they need money to get land and they can't get the jobs because they're only giving them to European immigrants, this is what happens. So again, Brazil is in no place to talk about we never had any racialized laws. We've already seen the fact that if people have land, then they can basically support themselves. But you block black people from being able to get land. And then when they're the people that are homeless that's on the streets, then you just point to those people and see, look at how these black people are. We leave them to their own resources and look what they do. Right. But they planned it that way. Here is another photo. This is Slaves and a Harvesting of Coffee in Rio de Janeiro in 1882. Fascinating black and white photo. These are just 2 points. And why these two? Firstly, because they are laws. They break any attempt by some people to apply subjectivity. And secondly, to understand that independent Brazil remained a slave country and took care at the first sign of abolition that black people had no way of prospering on Brazilian soil. So whenever your white colleague says that quotas are wrong, that we are all equal, remind them that there were laws to prevent the progress of black people in Brazil. Also remind them that the Ox Law, as it was nicknamed, was created to serve the children of large landowners. So the same Brazil that prevented blacks from owning land was the same one that reserved university places for the children of landowners. So what did these people look like that Brazil favored for the job market and for every other privilege in the country? Well, here are some Italian immigrants in Brazil. Okay. Italians at some point became the most populous people of European ancestry that was coming into the country. For a while it was, the Portuguese were obviously the dominant. You had Spanish people coming in, you had Germans coming in, but at a certain point, the Italian immigration was by far the most. They were the most populous immigrant group that was coming into the country. So who enters Brazil? The myth of open doors. Decree number 528 of June 28, 1890. The entry into the ports of the Republic of individuals who are valid and fit for work and who are not subject to criminal prosecution in their country is entirely free, that is, to come into Brazil, with the exception of indigenous people of Asia or Africa, who may only be admitted with the authorization of the National Congress in accordance with the conditions stipulated. So what's going on there? Again, they abolished black slavery in 1888. And on the flip side of that, 2 years later, they made sure that they wanted to get rid of the African population. I've talked about that extensively. And so in their minds, if we're going to get rid of black people by mixing them out through successive generations of mixture with white people, what sense would it make to have more Africans coming in? So they prohibited, people had to get special entry into the country if they were of Asian or African ancestry, starting from 1890. Okay, that's not a racist law, right? The decree transcribed above was intended to regulate the introduction and location of immigrants in the recently proclaimed Republic of the United States of Brazil. Yeah, you read that right. Once upon a time, Brazil was called Estados Unidos do Brasil, or the United States of Brazil. I even saw a flag. I have to show you that flag where it's pretty similar to the United States flag, the American flag, except the colors are different. Take a look at it and judge it for yourself. The articles presented show some of the characteristics considered desirable or undesirable by the Brazilian government with regard to people who wanted to live and work in Brazilian territory. This is not a Republican invention. Since the time of the empire, there have been recommendations and intentions to attract a specific workforce. In the mid-19th century, for example, there was a predilection for German migrants, even in comparison with groups of other Europeans, such as the French, Belgians, and Irish. Blacks, Chinese, and Hindus, considered inferior races, were despised in migration policies. Brazil's doors were not wide open. This is a ship. This is a boat with Italians arriving in Brazil in 1907. In the very first article of Decree 528, we see the government's intention to make it difficult for Asians and Africans to enter Brazil. In the introductory text of this series, we have already mentioned some aspects of how Darwinism and social determinism and the policies of European scientific racism contributed to accentuating in Brazil a policy of whitening the population, which was nothing more than a eugenicist project. I talked about this in a two-part series that I had last week, or maybe the week before. It's a two-part series. One of them is called Brazil's Dream, the elimination of blacks through racial mixture. Okay. In the video, the blog title is The Racist Dream of Brazil's White Elite, the elimination of the black population through generations of racial mixture. Check that video out when you get a chance. In that two-part series, you'll also see what he's talking about in this last paragraph. In this context, the painting A Redenção de Cã, meaning Ham's redemption, it was created by a Spanish artist named Modesto Brocos. And this is a good illustration of what they wanted for Brazil's future. The painting was used by the doctor and deputy director of the National Museum, João Batista de Lacerda, at the Universal Congress of Races, which took place in London in 1911. So for some further background on what I'm talking about, go and check out this video. It's a two-part series. I can provide a link for that in the description. But this is just a short video. I wanted to share this for people. Whenever you hear people say, we never had any racist laws in Brazil, like, well, yes, you did. There's no way to deny this. It's part of the historical record. And to this day, we still see these inequalities if you just divide it along color lines in Brazil. So anyway, want to know what you thought about today's video? Drop a comment in the comment section. Be sure to like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel. If you've seen more than a few videos that you really liked, click on the notification bell. That way you'll get updates when I put new videos up. Definitely, if you saw something that you like, consider dropping a super thanks. Always appreciate it. You can also cash at me at MrMarquez72. That's Mr. Marcus72. Every little dollar is appreciated. So with that said, I'm going to end this video here and ask that you all come by and check out the next video that I post.